Welcome to the Might in Motion podcast, where we empower leaders like you to navigate both their personal and professional journeys. Are you a manager hungry to reshape the course of your career? I'm your host, Mariana Kinney, and for the past 24 years, I've been a Fortune 50 leader, absorbing invaluable lessons from industry luminaries on how to break free from limiting beliefs and habits. On the Might in Motion podcast, our compass is guided by the 4 M's: motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might. Each episode, we dive into conversations with leaders from Fortune companies, doctors, and entrepreneurs. Their stories, their might in motion, will not just captivate you, but ignite the spark within. Join us as we unravel the secrets to success, providing you with the inspiration to craft your own action plan and prepare yourself towards your goals. This is your journey, your might in motion. Welcome to the podcast that fuels your aspirations. Welcome to Might in Motion. Today's episode is sponsored by Pantheon FM. Are you struggling to get a constant flow of clients? Meet the Pantheon. It's an exclusive network of entrepreneurs changing the world through entrepreneurship. Sell more of your high-ticket programs by becoming an icon in your industry who rallies together in what we call the Pantheon. For more information, contact me directly, Mariana Kinney, your host of today's episode. Today, I bring to you Katherine Valentine. She's a speaker, a corporate trainer, a researcher. She's also the CEO of Worthmore Strategies, where she helps companies advance and retrain female talent. A top-rated speaker, her clients include multinational organizations such as JP Morgan, KPMG, and TIAA. Her work has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and Forbes. Wow, Katherine, you are a powerhouse. I'm so excited to have you on Might in Motion, and I can't wait to learn more about you and Worthmore Strategies.
Mariana, thank you for having me on. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
So you really are an advocate for women and helping women to be an advocate for themselves. Can you tell us how that Worthmore Strategies started? What's the goal of your organization?
So the ironic part about it is I spent the beginning part of my career at McKinsey where we plan everything, right? Everything is a strategic plan and we'll tell you 10 years out where this is going. But this company happened entirely by accident. So when I was in business school, I was doing my MBA internship, which is essentially a 3-month job interview. And I had an opportunity midway through to renegotiate some parts of the agreement. And so on a Friday afternoon, I realized that this was going to be happening on Monday. And I spent the entire weekend getting ready for this negotiation, right? This is going to date me. This is when Barnes and Nobles were like everywhere. So I went to the Barnes and Noble on Saturday and I bought all the books, read all the books, highlighted all the books, wrote a script of what I was going to say, and then practiced it over and over again with my mom. And on Monday morning, I went in, our meeting was at 10 o'clock. By 10:06, I had managed to offend my manager. And by 10:10, I was being told that I was no longer a culture fit, which, as we know, is sort of like like you're done at this point.
Yep.
And since I wasn't going to get a job there, having the internship no longer made sense. I needed to go find a job. And so I was, the internship was ended in that conversation. And then I was escorted out of the building by security. And so the joke that I always make is that in less time than it took to get a latte that morning, I managed to completely derail my career.
Wow.
So I was in a really fortunate position at that point in time where I still had a year left of business school. So I went back, and at that point in time, there was just starting to have, we were getting emerging research on the intersection of gender and negotiation. And basically what was coming out is that all this stereotypical advice about how to negotiate is not only not optimized for women, but is often wrong for women. Like, you would rather not negotiate than negotiate the way that people frequently tell you to.
Right.
And so I was just sitting in the right place at the right time. And I spent a year studying all of that, ended up writing a report, and then did it on the side for a few years, helping friends. And then when the pandemic hit, I realized, and all these women were having to leave, I realized that what I learned would help them stay. And so I wrote an article called Ask Before You Go that went viral. And JP Morgan reached out and said, hey, we're doing everything we can to keep women. Can you spin up a training and can we try this? And we tried it. And lo and behold, it is still the most popular offering that they give to their women every year. We're on our third year now. And that sort of created a little company around, we know that the systems are changing and need to change for women to be successful in the workplace. But while they are changing, there are things that we can do a better job for women, right? Right now, we're continuing to give them tools that were built for men and then sort of gaslighting them when it doesn't work. Instead, we have plenty of academic research telling us how to do certain things better, negotiating, networking, saying no. And my job is to bring that research straight to the women who can use it tomorrow to continue to advance their career.
That's really enlightening, because you took something that some people could have walked away and been so devastated, right, of being walked out, told you're not a culture fit, yada yada yada, right, all the things, and you pivoted. You took that pivotal moment and now have created something that's going to allow so many other women to make their own pivots in a positive way.
I hope so. Although I wouldn't give myself as much credit as you are. Like, I was devastated. I sat in that car and cried for hours.
Yeah.
You think it was, after you go through something like that, it just didn't make sense to me. And that was the part that I needed to try and unpack.
Yeah. But so many people avoid the unpacking, right? They avoid doing that. So I love it.
Not very many people had the fortune. I had a whole year at school.
Yeah.
Like, what else was I going to do?
Right? What else? I love it. I love it. So, and it's really cool that, this philosophy of ask before you go has turned into something where you're helping companies like JP Morgan really make that pivot. As a female leader within a corporate America space for so long, that is a challenge. It's a challenge to make sure that you're communicating with your male peers or superiors in a way that makes sense, and you can create that dynamic and that positive connection, but also sometimes with other women, right? Because a lot of times we take on that more masculine philosophy versus maybe a feminine energy, and it can create some division even among peer-to-peer females.
I love that you were saying that, because one of the things that I'm starting to notice, and I'm still sort of catching up here, but any company worth their salt has a women's program at this point in time, right?
Right.
The problem is that the content is old. It's old, it's stale, and it has very much like a fix the woman by making her a man flavor. And we can do better. We can do better, and women deserve better. And now we have, the research that's being cranked out right now is incredible. And we have so much good research that says, like, hey, if you want to negotiate more effectively, and 82% of women say more authentically, here's how you do it. Hey, men need one network to be successful in business, but women actually need two. Isn't that helpful to know? There's so much good content right now. Unfortunately, it's like the companies haven't totally updated it yet.
Right.
So some of what I'm enjoying doing the most is companies that are bringing us in saying, like, hey, can you do module 2 and 4 because those are really stale? Yes, let's bring your women something better because they deserve it.
Right. Now, when you come into a company, are you speaking directly around how to help women negotiate not only for themselves, but on the company's behalf? So renegotiating contracts and all those kind of things that happen in corporate America.
It's a great question. There is a huge business to be done there, and I am not going after it, because what causes backlash in negotiation for women is when you negotiate on behalf of yourself. When you negotiate on behalf of a company, you're actually not at a higher risk. And so the standard strategies work in that scenario. So anyone could come in and do that training and will, massively change a life, I don't think. Yep. When you're negotiating on behalf of yourself is when we're at much higher risk than men are. And that's where all of these solutions are particularly effective.
So what do you think holds women back from negotiating for self in a productive, positive way?
I think it's fear, and it's incredibly justified fear. One of the messages that we hear is like, oh, well, you're afraid, but you just need to, stand up, put on your big girl pants and go do it. And I would like to give another message, which is that you're afraid because you're smart. Because we know, whether we know it, whether we can articulate it, we know that we are at a higher risk of backlash, whether you've read the research or not. And so that spidey sense that's going off is telling you something important. The good news is we now have a decade of research. I mean, I've synthesized over 13,000 pages of academic research on how to do this better. And we have great solutions. We just haven't done the best job getting those solutions to the women who can use them.
So for those listening now, can't sit through your whole class, maybe they work for a different organization, what's maybe one nugget that they can take away today that they can leverage in their negotiation?
Can I have the permission to give you 3?
Oh, of course. Always. I love 3 nuggets.
So what we've done with this, sort of 13,000 pages of academic research is synthesize it into 3 key strategies for women when negotiating. Strategy number 1 is to think holistically. And that is that we know that there's, a gender pay gap. We're all familiar with that. But the gender gap in stock options is 80%. The gender gap in team support is 40%, right? The gender gap in pay is important, but there's so many sitting out there. So when you think about negotiating, it's not just base pay, but it is what can help me deliver more impact? What will make me happier? What will reduce my stress? What will I get excited about? And then what we've done is we've collected over hundreds of negotiations, a list of 75 things that we've seen women successfully negotiate. And that can be another just resource to go look at. So that's number 1, think holistically. Number 2 is to ask relationally. And I'm happy to break down for you exactly what that formula is. But when you ask relationally, what happens is that you, and I'm going to put in quotations, virtually eliminate, that's from the researcher out of Georgetown, the risk of backlash. Because backlash comes from the friction between what society expects from us and how we have been cultivated and cultured, and what society expects a negotiation to be. So society expects you to be others focused. And frankly, most of the time we are more authentic and feel more comfortable in that role. But society also thinks negotiation is this sort of fight to the death. Then now we're in a gender stacked game that we're set up to fail in. But if we ask relationally, which puts emphasis on the benefits to the whole, not just us, but the team, the client, then we're able to sidestep that risk and be much more successful in what we get. So 1, think holistically. 2, ask relationally. And then 3 is to discuss collaboratively. This has been a macro trend in negotiation for about 20 years, but it still, frankly, isn't done as frequently in employee-employer negotiations as I would expect, which is shifting mindsets from, it's not me versus you, it's us versus the problem. And the problem is anything that prevents me from delivering the impact I'm capable of at the lowest stress level possible, because that's better for you and it's better for me. That's kind of how we want to set up those discussions. So happy to go into more detail on any of those, but those are sort of the 3-level high view on what we would recommend.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's that whole thought process of the holistic approach. I know for me personally, there are times where, I've negotiated between moving from role to role. And, it might be a situation where they say, hey, we can't, you're not going to be able to get a pay bump because it's a lateral. And I'm like, well, every opportunity is an opportunity for a negotiation. And that may not mean financial, on my salary, but it might be, hey, I deserve extra time off, or I deserve something because that's important to me. Right. And so,
well, how many more resources can I bring onto my team? And when can I present to the executive team? And I would like to present at this conference. And can I get your support on all kinds of things that we can negotiate?
Yes, which is really exciting because, to your point, many times people think of just the one number instead of how is this creating me as a better, well-rounded contributor to the organization. And when you mentioned holistically, I was like, wow, that's completing the circle.
Well, and I think it's also people very much focus on the number, but even more broadly focus on what's on the paper. So this is what the job looks like, and this is right. But that's why this resource of 75 things to negotiate was so important to me, because there's no central repository of how big your thinking can get, right? Up to this point, it was what's on the job app, like what's on the job description, but also what will you negotiate that you're not going to do any longer because you're to take on more. So inherently we need to cut something. Or what extra resources do you need to include that? Or if you're really going to think big, which is my favorite, like, what do you want your life to look like? And what levers can we pull in the negotiation to get you there? So I worked with somebody whose life dream was to do an Ironman, which is like almost impossible to train for when you're working normal hours. So we ended up being able to negotiate Fridays off for the long run. And, here and there, like, you can kind of pull at these strings to design a life that you're excited about.
Have you mentioned that a lot of this whole genesis of starting this company, happened towards the beginning of the pandemic. Do you see negotiations changing because of more of a work from home type opportunity versus you have to be, at a, building per se?
Yes. So before the pandemic, the number one thing I was asked to help people negotiate is I would like to work from home a day a week or something. Like, we're thinking big.
Right. One day a month, please.
Not only is that much more acceptable, but frankly, companies have to get more creative. Before, they could really dig in their heels and just say no. Now everything's evolving where the impetus is to think creatively. So what you can negotiate now, I think, is so much broader, and you're much more likely to be successful than 3 years ago.
Yeah. I think it's pretty exciting to see, because it's giving us, as a leader, I have now more resources of people and pool to go after when I have an opening, right? But then it's also creating an environment within the team of a culture that is more open and adaptable and understanding. And that's the kind of team I want to lead.
Well, and that's the kind of team that's proven to be higher performing when people
Right.
can be themselves. And part of that is negotiating some of those differences, right? Are you caregiving for a parent? Does that mean that, Wednesdays from 2 to 4, you need to be out because they have that standing appointment and they need you there? Okay, great. Let's talk that through.
So why do you think companies are paying to train women to negotiate on their own behalf? That seems like a little counterintuitive.
So if you can imagine me in the pandemic being like, telling my partner, I want to start a company to help women negotiate, and I think companies will pay for it. And you're like, really? I have been incredibly amazed and frankly inspired by, and it's not all companies, but by the 10% of companies who really do want to support women. They're not just saying it anymore. Let me take that back. There are companies that are still saying it. They tend to not hire a negotiation expert. The companies that hire me are very serious about actually giving women the support that they need, and they're ready to think creatively about it. Now, part of that is, again, that negotiate holistically thing. Salary is something we should talk about. It is not the only thing that we should talk about. From the research, it's not the only thing that drives your happiness. So let's talk about the other things. But I've been really, I think it's amazing how many corporations are doing this now.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting, because to me, it's an actual real investment. To your point earlier, before it would be, oh, you have your women's group and let's learn how to dress and let's learn
or how to communicate. Like, I appreciate it. That's important. But for someone to bring in a communication expert isn't necessarily, they're not really putting their money, they don't have to put their money where their mouth is on that one. For someone to bring in a negotiation expert, they are incredibly serious about your career.
It sounds to me that those companies that are bringing you in truly have a culture and a set of values of lifting up their associates.
Yes. And it's created this, like, selfishly, it's created this beautiful thing in my business where I adore my clients.
Yeah.
Because if you are going to do this, then you're totally bought in.
Right. That's really, really cool. So what does it mean for men? Because we do have male listeners, right? And I don't want to be talking in a just female cone, but like, what does it mean for the men in the room, the men that may be participating in these kind of negotiations as well?
It's a great question. And actually, what's been so fun to see over the past few years is when I started, our audiences were, 100% women. And now they're like 20% men. And when I talk to these men afterwards and, ask them, one of the things that they say is that they're recognizing that in order to be an effective leader now and in the future, they have to understand other points of view. And so just sitting in the room allows them to understand when someone comes to them to negotiate, or when their boss has to negotiate, or whatever it is, the difference in dynamics that that person is facing. So as an individual, for men, I would say that by being part of this, you get to be part of something that's prospering, right? So the study by McKinsey showed that true gender equity everywhere would raise global GDP by $28 trillion, which is one of those numbers that I almost can't contextualize. That's the revenue of Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Google combined, and then multiplied by 25.
Wow.
So if we can figure out how to set up workforces in which women can truly thrive, then we're going to be in a growing company. And when we're in a growing company, there's just more rewards to reap than when things are narrowing in and there used to be 10 seats, but now there's 8 seats. Now there's 6 seats because our revenues are down. So that's one thing for men. Like, if you can help us unlock how to advance female talent, there's just more opportunity for everyone. The second thing is, as a manager, it's helpful to recognize that women tend to undervalue themselves, and that's what the research would say. But because you're incentivized on results, giving women the opportunity to have those conversations in a way that's going to be a little bit harder for you in the beginning will ultimately drive higher performance. And then I think the other piece that I've been kind of amazed by that's happening is we're telling our children and our siblings and these people we love and care about that you can do or be anything you want. And now we're recognizing that that's not entirely true. But this is one of those tools that can allow the better world we want to create to actually exist.
Yeah. I mean, I have 2 girls. They're 10 and 7. And there are times where I'm like, okay, you have to, how are you going to negotiate this? So my youngest wanted to get her ears pierced. And I was like, great. How are you going to convince your father to let you get your ears pierced? Right. And so just trying to take those little opportunities of how do you put together your pitch? Why is it important to you? What's the reason? It's not just because you want it. It's not just because you want to, to do it. How are you going to convince others?
Well, I love the age at which you've started to do that at. So one of the most fascinating studies I've reviewed were by 2 researchers where they invited children into the lab and they gave them all a coloring page. And the children went and colored and they brought it back. And the researcher said, it was scripted, so the same thing every time. Thank you so much for your work. How much do I owe you? And what they found is that as early as 8 years old, little girls were asking for 40% less than little boys were. And when the researchers took those children to the side and said, hey, why did you choose that number? What they found is that the overwhelming majority of girls were saying something like, I thought it was worth more, but I didn't want to upset anybody. Which means that before we know Santa Claus isn't real, we know that there is something about the way that negotiations has historically been done that is risky to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's profound. Now I got to go rethink all my negotiation conversations with the kids.
Well, but you're doing it with children that are the perfect age, right? I think sometimes we think, oh, well, we'll learn this when we get into the workforce, but actually the seed was planted 15 years before that.
Right. And you never, these are things that aren't taught in school. They're not taught in grade school, high school, college, right? You learn either from who you know, and you have really great mentors that can pull you along, or you learn by partnering with an organization like Worthmore Strategies where, hey, now hey, I've got to go invest this in me. I'm not going to go get this from someone else. I'm going to go to the expert. I'm going to go to Katherine. I'm going to go and pour this time into myself so I can learn it. So if the listeners are really interested in that, wow, this resonates, this is maybe a growth opportunity, or maybe they work for an organization that would be interested in having you and your team come in, what are some of the services that you provide from a one-on-one, or is everything within a corporate structure? How does that look?
Great question. I used to do coaching. We've now moved to everything being mostly speaking, either with corporations or women's conferences or whatever, simply because in 1 hour, I can reach hundreds of people, and that helps us change culture. So there's 2 things I would say for listeners who are interested in learning more. The first one is that list of 75 things that we created. You can download that for free by going to our website at worthmorestrategies.com and clicking the yellow bar on the top. and then it'll just get emailed straight to you. That resource took us, again, 3 years to create. So please use it, and I hope it's helpful to you. And then the second one is, if you're part of a women's organization, please consider recommending us as a speaker to help you and the group that you're with learn how to negotiate better. Because the other thing that happens in those rooms are, now you have other people to role play with, to talk to about, like, you have an instant community to support you in sort of having those conversations.
That's great. I've got a link on the screen, but we're going to drop it into the show notes. So for those of you listening, go into the show notes. There's going to be a link there straight to the 75 things. Great resource to go and leverage for you to continue to learn. This has been a really cool conversation. Everybody who listens, I love my golden nuggets. So I've got quite a few written down. So the first are the main three, right? What's holding women back is fear. And so the things that women can do to overcome that is to, number one, think holistically. It may not just be about the pay. It might be about your happiness, your stress. What do you get excited about that you can include in that holistic negotiation? You want to ask relationally. That's number two. How does it benefit the whole team, right? So it becomes, instead of a you versus them and us versus other people, to be able to get what you want. And then three, discuss collaboratively. I guess that's the us versus the problem. So how do you discuss it collaboratively with the person that you're negotiating with, so that you've created a partner in that negotiation that didn't even know they were going to be a partner at the time, which is really, really cool. And there's you're basing all of this on research, which is also really cool. The data is there to back it up, that can help women get over that fear of negotiation and move forward. It's been a really interesting conversation, Katherine, and I've enjoyed this time. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything final that you would want to share with the group?
Mariana, I'm grateful for the time. I mean, this is one of those things where we see in the data that women are negotiating more, but we're only successful half as often as men. So we know that now this is just an education thing, right? We have the solutions. They've been proven at Harvard and Georgetown and Wharton. We have them. Now my job is to get them to women who can use them. So thank you so much for the opportunity to have this discussion and hopefully help some of those female listeners.
Thank you for joining us on another insightful episode of Might in Motion. Your time and commitment to personal and professional growth is truly appreciated. As you continue your journey, remember the power lies within you. Apply the wisdom shared by our incredible guests. Harness the 4 M's: motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might, and make your path towards success uniquely yours. If you found today's episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower leaders like you. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and always keep your might in motion. Until next time, this is Mariana Kinney signing off, wishing you boundless success on your journey ahead.